Allie and Evan, the man we've spoken with who says he's a survivor, says the abuse took the form of massaging and groping by Herbert Shank when he was a 13-year-old boy. He says the abuse persisted for a year and a half. Shank himself says he resigned due to what he calls incidents and went to treatment for a little over 2 years. And because of his actions, the Diocese of Harrisburg says it turned Shank's case over to law enforcement.
I was very young, 12-year-old sensitive boy, saw parents in distress and turmoil, and he took the opportunity to identify me and to prey on me.
This man says he was sexually abused as a child by Herbert Shank, a former priest. According to a spokesperson for the Diocese of Harrisburg, Herbert Shank's case was turned over to the York County District Attorney's Office in February of 1995. When asking the York County District Attorney's Office for comment, we received the following statement. As per policy, the Office of the District Attorney does not confirm or deny whether or not there is an investigation until such time charges are or are not filed. Did you ever have a conversation with the York County District Attorney's Office?
No, I did not, no.
So to my understanding, and just so we have our story straight, is you resigned in February of...
No, November.
November of...
94.
Because the diocese told us that you were taken out of ministry in February of 95.
Well, that might have been when the bishop's formal letter came, but before that formal letter I was told to resign my ministry, and I was not in any way to perform any ministerial actions, period, and to go to where therapy was offered.
There was never any point you were ever approached or had a conversation with law enforcement?
No.
Law enforcement never spoke with you?
No, if they spoke with anybody, they spoke with my lawyer, I guess.
Is there any way I could have your lawyer's name?
Not right now, no.
Okay.
In fact, to tell you the truth, I have to go through a lot of channels for that when I have this different situation right now.
Our source says in the 1980s, he asked Shank to meet at a property on Fix Road in Warrington Township, York County, currently owned by Father Carl Tancredi, a retired priest within the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg. It's a place where our source says he'd been to between 3 and 6 times with Shank, who he says had free reign on the property. He says Shank brought him and other boys there where they would drink alcohol and the physical contact would persist.
We would have shaving cream fights and whipped cream fights in our underwear running around this property. This was a property that, looking back now, is pretty scary. It is a place where when you walk into, all of the bedroom doors are padlocked from the outside.
We went to the property in question. Father Tancredi agreed to speak on the record, but off camera. He says he knew Shank as a classmate in the late 1960s. He says their social relationship ended in the late 1970s. Tancredi says the property hosted people from various parishes, serving as a getaway place while also holding dinner parties with married couples and families. Tancredi says Shank came to the property but never lived there. Father Tancredi said he never saw any of the actions described by our source, never saw any shaving or whipped cream around the property, nor had he ever had a party with underage people. As for the padlocks, he says they were innocently placed on the doors to allow privacy and security to anyone staying on the property, allowing in and out access, a casual setting. Tancredi says he was never told Shank would use the property or was asked by Shank himself to use the property. The two were assigned to St. Rose of Lima in the mid-1990s, but Tancredi says they held different positions within the church. He says Shank was suddenly removed from St. Rose of Lima and only heard hearsay about alleged abuse. Before Tancredi took sole ownership of the property as his private residence, he says the property was shared with others, including Father Joseph Carolyn and Father Sylvan Capitani. We asked Father Carolyn for comment. He says he stayed at the cabin with 4 other people in the late 1960s, early 70s, and sold out his share of the property a long time ago. He refused to talk about Shank or the property. We also asked Father Capitani for comment.
Oh, no, I don't want to talk to you guys. Okay, I know why you're here.
He says he wasn't interested in further talking with us. Shank acknowledged he'd been to the property before, but didn't have any knowledge of what we were asking about. When our source says he met Shank at the property, he says he confronted Shank about the abuse for the first time.
I told him that he was a sick individual, that he needed help, that he is a predator, that I wanted absolutely nothing to ever do with him again. And his response to me was very shocking, very dismissive. And I told him that I was leaving.
It was the last time our source says he would see Herbert Schenk until he was in college. He says Schenk came to his father's home at the time.
We're sitting on the porch, and my dad offered him something to drink. And he said, "You want some water or something?" He goes, "No, I need something stronger than that." So I think my dad poured him a bourbon.
He claims Schenk came that day in 1988 to tell him and his father he was being defrocked from the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg due to allegations of molesting a boy while at St. Rose of Lima in York.
He turned to me and asked me why I did not stop him, which I thought was probably one of the most amazing, ridiculously absurd questions I've ever heard come out of a person's mouth. I responded back to him because I was a child, and I had left. And that was the last time I have seen Herbert Schenk.
He says Schenk told him and his father to expect a call in regards to the allegations and investigation, but a call never came. Now this man, he says he shared his story with us out of concerns it would not appear in the upcoming Pennsylvania grand jury report on child sex abuse within 6 Catholic dioceses in the Commonwealth. The state Supreme Court ruled a redacted form of the report should be made public. Its deadline for release is a week from today at 2 p.m. Jack Ebel, Fox 43 News.